Hey everyone, welcome back to WorkTech. I'm George LaRocque, and we've got some more industry funding news for you. I'm real excited to talk about this deal. Joyous, innovative employee feedback app based out of New Zealand, just closed New Zealand 15 million US dollar, 10.5 million dollar A round. And I'm joined by industry legend and old friend Mike Carden, co-founder of Joyous. Welcome, Mike.
George, how are you? I'll take old friend, but I think industry legend. That's talking it up.
Well, I'll tell you, we're still talking about some of your marketing antics out in the field from one of your first goes. So legend in my book, but that's for another time. So this is a really interesting deal. I'm excited about your category, employee feedback. And when I talk to HR leaders, listening, not the creepy kind of listening, but really listening, like what we really mean by that in HR and leadership is top of mind, especially with everything going on in the world. So I think a lot of folks will be interested in learning more. If you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself and about Joyous, that would be great.
Sure. Well, look, I mean, I think that Joyous is it's a simple idea, really. I guess that we wanted to fundamentally include your people in making change happen in the organization. So it was an idea of how you include people in that. And I guess that the bit where we've been so successful is that we've taken taken feedback out of kind of the narrow HR vertical that it's sat in. So oftentimes feedback was used to measure employee engagement and employee experience. Those things are important, but the key to that is that we've gone and said, hey, actually, feedback's this really powerful tool. Why don't you use it to improve operational efficiency, or use it to de-risk some of your biggest strategic projects, as well as still use it to transform culture and those sort of things. And I think that the key piece of it too is that we've moved away from this era of feedback being about measurement. And like I said, it's really about taking people on the journey now. It's an opportunity to do things in a two-way fashion, get people's input into what you're doing, help them out, keep kind of moving. And so, I guess that we're, like I said, we're, helping orgs include their people in change.
Yeah. So let's stay on that, on the how part, because I noticed a lot of your messaging and positioning is centered around agile. And I'm curious, how does the product support an agile company, and well, we'll start. Let's stop there.
Sure. Yeah, look, I mean, I think the best way to kind of describe that is just to sort of think about actually how Joyous works. And so it's quite different than other feedback platforms have been in the past, right? Okay. So the problem is everyone has a sort of paradigm of kind of an anonymous survey when they think of feedback, and that's we couldn't be further from that. So in Joyous, you start with a big business objective. And so let's just say that business objective is an agile transformation. You want to make sure people develop an agile mindset. You want to make sure that people start using the rituals and processes of agile. Now that's just one kind of business objective, but it's a good example for this kind of thing. Sure. So what Joyous does is it takes that big objective and it'll break it down into small conversations, right? Little weekly conversations, effectively, about subtopics of that. So it might be about how stand-ups work, or it might be about developing an entrepreneurial mindset, but small subjects about the big subject, in this case an agile transformation. And so it then takes those conversation starters, we call them, and it sends them out to your staff, to your frontline, throughout the organization, often weekly, because they're little things, and those arrive on people's devices, and then people just interact with them, provide feedback. They provide feedback with their name attached, because why wouldn't you? Everything else is like that. It'd be weird if email was anonymous, wouldn't it? So like you just kind of interact with that the way you'd interact with any kind of chat. Yeah. And people providing input, they want to be acknowledged. They want to kind of be part of the solution. Then the kind of magic starts. What we do there is we route the feedback then to someone that cares. So this might be, if it was feedback on operational improvement, it might be just routed to your site manager or a skip manager. Although it might be routed specifically to a subject matter expert if it was like something technical or something like that. In an agile case, it probably gets routed to to your squad, and then maybe up through to your tribe, but also might get routed to a chapter area lead, routed to a coach. You can route to different places, and those people who care about that feedback can then interact with it, right? So they can do typically one of three things. They might ask for more information. This happens a lot. You sort of say, oh, look, the one-on-ones don't happen frequently enough. Well, can you tell me a bit more about that? What's causing that? Oh, it's because they want to happen in the morning, and etc. And so someone can interact with it. They can ask more information. They can provide encouragement, like, hey, you're doing a great job of this, do more of it. Or they can, maybe take some action, provide a sort of solution for that sort of thing. And so what's happening here is, the interesting thing is that all of that kind of feedback is now turned into conversations, and those conversations are actually creating action at the edge of the organization, and that's moving you forward. And this is the interesting thing. I've talked sort of 3 steps here of feedback, and it's all just about people, right? It's not about measurement or any of those sort of things. It's about making stuff actually, taking people on the journey. But then the cool thing is, kind of like the 4th piece of it, is that we actually do now have an extraordinary data set, because it's not just a data set of ratings and statistics or even small comments. It's a data set of conversations between real people. And so we then sit our machine intelligence on top of that. And it's very curated machine intelligence that will learn about your organization, and it will start to identify the big themes. So it'll start to find the big roadblocks, maybe to agile transformation. So maybe like, hey, people in the call centers haven't really got a collaboration mindset yet, and it'll start to tell you those sort of themes. So that bit's kind of measurement. But if you think about it this way, what we're doing is we're kind of we're measuring stuff, telling you the state of your agile transformation, but we're also helping people on the journey, on the way. We're helping them kind of go. And so we're seeing this getting, the reason we talk about agile is just because so many agile orgs, whether they're in retail or in banking and finance, or in telcos, are going, hey, we don't really have tools for feedback that help us on this way. But also we're doing it in an agile fashion, right? We're allowing people to own their feedback, which is this is the extraordinary thing to me, not wanting to rant, but like anonymous feedback is such bullshit. Just from this perspective that if I provide you feedback anonymously, it's now immediately no longer my problem. I've thrown it over the fence and someone else is going to deal with it, right?
Right.
Whereas like that's just not even agile, is it? In agile, it's like, if I identify something where we can improve things, well, then I should probably think about whether I'm part of the solution. And so, in Joyous, you provide feedback. You can see where that feedback goes. You can let people interact with it. You can see what people think of your feedback, which is, I guess, it's kind of meta, right? So we help orgs of agile transformations, but we're a much more agile kind of tool set.
Well, we have, there are a lot of tools out there that do the anonymous survey or the anonymous sort of feedback, which those really aren't focused on the work. They're and there's a time and a place for those. This is really an interesting, you're in the flow of the work. You're about helping people get work done. You're also focused on the human in this process, and the humans, I should say, and helping them, provide feedback and take accountability and see the accountability, the transparency, and get stuff done. I like that. I like that approach. That's cool. And it has to be a smart, so you're talking about all that routing and where it goes. There's got to be an incredible data set and intelligence, making that happen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing we love about this is it's actually like, as I described it before, it's a fairly simple idea, take a big problem, chop it up into small pieces, distribute those kind of small pieces to your team, get their input, route that feedback somewhere, and get people to interact with the feedback, and then use machine intelligence to extract big insights out of it. And the cool thing about that sort of idea is that we can just continue to keep investing in those verticals. It's not like we have to go off and build new functionality. What gives me joy in this all the time is that, customers just keep coming up with new ways of using it. It's like we'll implement it on the back of a fairly standard situation where someone wants to, they're in the middle of a cultural transformation and they want to make sure that some of those elements are sticking, and things which HR folk are kind of used to. And then you'll have people come into the HR team going, hey, could we use it to do this? And it'll be something you've just, some use case we've never thought of before. It'll be taking, understanding from field service technicians, what challenges they're having installing fiber during the pandemic. A real example. And it's like, so we're not out there thinking of the use cases. It's just like, we've created a really a new enterprise tool. A new enterprise tool that kind of can be used.
And what types of companies are using it? Whether that's industries or whether that's what are the characteristics of a customer?
Yeah, look, so right from the start, we've targeted the world's largest companies. We are about selling to the enterprise proper. And large dispersed workforces are a feature of most enterprises. Most enterprises have people doing something real. Whether that's working in retail or in quick service restaurants or laying fiber to people's homes. The industries where we're most successful, where we have some of the world's really largest players on the customer list are in telco, infrastructure, but we're starting to develop some real strength in banking and retail. So that's how these businesses grow, right? You become successful in one vertical, and it's easier to grow within the vertical. So we've been relatively low key in this, right? We haven't been out there with a huge sales team. We've been very kind of product focused. So we've kind of taken it, big account by big account.
Yeah. Well, you're no product of the pandemic. I mean, we met, it was a few years ago, and I sent you in the email. We sat under that fake sky in Vegas. And
true, right?
When you were just, it was, I think the product was living and breathing at that point, but it was just the start. And you've been out there going at this for a couple of years, and what I'm seeing, what we're all living through right now, distributed work and a distributed workforce, that's not new. But this pandemic really, like so many things, it shined a light on the need to be in touch, to be connected, to get feedback. So I would imagine, you might have seen some existing customers expand their footprint with this, and probably new customers start realizing how important this was or is.
Yeah, look, the last year was obviously an unusual ride for every single person on the planet, right? But gosh, it was weird for us. Like, we started the year, we were beginning of last year, we were like 2 years old, right? So we'd done a couple of small funding rounds. We'd hired a team, and they were really a team of scientists and engineers focused on kind of this problem of trying to how do you create an open feedback system you can apply outside of HR. And so that was kind of like the problem set. And we'd started to get a few sort of pilot customers, and we'd started to have conversations with people, and we're sort of like going, oh, actually, this is looking good. This is starting to look good. And then I guess what happened is that, the pandemic hit, and every single one of our enterprise prospects went, oh, no, we're not buying anything at the moment. No, we don't know what's going on. We're not doing anything. And then literally over the next 6 weeks, as we came out of that doom and gloom, every single one of them said, oh, no, we need to start doing this. We need to start doing it this week. And it was, I think that, like, if you actually, what people often don't understand is in large enterprises, there isn't that much of a connection to people at the front line. And, even the term front line, right? There's not a single person in the world that doesn't know what a frontline worker is anymore, right? That's the front line is a feature of the last 2 years. Right. And so this actual idea where, gosh, I'm going to connect with my front line, and I'm going to find out what's challenging for them, and I'm going to try and work on it, and I'm going to try and understand that and so on, was really a new idea. And then, of course, that was coupled with just this massive appetite for enterprise change, right? For transformation, particularly digital transformation. And I think we benefited from that in a couple of ways. The first part of it initially was like, well, that gives you appetite to implement things, and implementing software like Joyous was one of those things. But the other part of it is that when you're transforming lots of things in your business, you've got to include people in making that change happen. You've got to work out a way of including people. Otherwise, you'll just, regardless of what you're changing, it's not going to stick. It's just not going to, it's like, we've been talking to some very large customers about big strategic projects recently, and it's interesting when you think about a big strategic project like developing a new service or something like that. Well, it doesn't really happen at the top. It happens right at the edges. Like people working in retail need to understand it, or people working in the call center need to understand it, or people implementing it need to understand it, and so on. So that bit of going, oh well, we're making big change, we're going to need to bring the team along with us, is we've sat right in the zeitgeist, right? It's been so it's been it's just been nuts, right? Like I think we've multiplied staff by 5 in the last year and a half.
Wow. And that market reaction that you talked about, the sort of tapping on the brakes for 6 weeks, that tracks to much of what I've heard. Everyone sort of stopped at the beginning, and the first thing CEOs did, the C-suite leadership team, was take account of what's going on in the business. They were first focused on the business, waiting for the other shoe to drop, and then they turned to their people and turned to what was now in front of them. And those 6 weeks living through it felt like a lifetime, but it went by like a heartbeat, right? And thinking back, so that's interesting.
We had like a prospect who was a pretty big enterprise literally say to us, oh, like, we've just turned off all feedback. So they were kind of a classic Qualtrics customer, kind of a pulse surveys and so on. It's like, so like sort of rabbit in the headlights. It's like, okay, well, we're getting all this feedback from the team and we can't work out how to deal with it, and like we're worried about because you're putting people on on forced annual leave and all sorts of things. Like, so we've turned it all off. It's like you can sort of see that that response, you can understand it. It's kind of a panic response, right? And that maybe lasted a few days, and then someone went like, oh, hang on. It's like, have we got this right? But to be fair, like we talked to a telco, and who was deep into rollout with us, and like you're talking to their senior team, like they didn't know if they were going to get paid. They didn't know if they were going to get so some of their customers are huge airlines. They weren't sure if the huge airlines were going to pay their bill. Things like that, which you sort of forget about, right? So like it was like this sort of there was a sort of initial period of like, is everything going to kind of fall to pieces here? Are we not actually going to be able to we're going to have a cash flow hole that we hadn't ever imagined, and so on. Now, of course, it didn't play out like that. Obviously lots of governments poured lots of stimulus into things, and lots of stuff didn't happen. So I guess that it was just like the panic of the first few days. But the other thing which we do definitely know is that you're completely correct. Everyone turned to going, oh, actually, the important thing in here is the team, or at least all the good companies did.
Right. There you go. So let's talk about the company and the deal a little bit. Tell me about those co-founders. I noticed, there are a few people listed as co-founders. How did you come together? How'd you convince them to do this with you? I guess that's one of the questions.
I mean, look, the founding team is great, right? I mean, so look, I spent a while, after I'd left, Cornerstone OnDemand, which had acquired Sonar Six, and I got involved in a few other things, and I had this desire to build a new business. I wasn't sure what category it was in, but there was two things which were really sort of like burning to me. One was that I wanted to do something purposeful, right? Wanted to make life better for people at work, and feedback was one of the ways we could see that we could do that, right? That you could actually do that. And then the other thing too was that technology is really changing. So Sonar Six grew up in this era of SaaS companies, which was like take an on-premise piece of software and put it on the cloud. Put it in the cloud, should I say? And that's not, I mean, it's non-trivial, but it's not that hard, right? So all these great businesses like, I don't know, Salesforce.com took CRM and put it in the cloud, right? But there was this sort of new opportunity now, which was that like actually there was going to be real integrations and microtransactional systems, rather than kind of forms type thing. And importantly, there was also going to be machine learning built on top of user experience built on top of machine learning. It was just a good era, to go, oh, we can actually do something real and new and different here, right? So that was the two things. I was looking for a tech co-founder, and spent a few years trying to do that, because I think the challenge you always have is not so much finding someone who's got that generative ability at the beginning. I mean, that's hard to find too. But you also want someone who can take that and then really work out how you kind of scale tech and build big tech. And so eventually, after searching for a while, I ended up with my brother. So I probably could have just gone and asked my mum at the start, but like
Right.
he's a serious engineer, right?
Yeah.
Was in charge of a big chunk of Bell Labs and other labs from Alcatel-Lucent as part of their senior team. So he was living in France. I convinced him to come to New Zealand to kind of like do this. We sort of iterated it for 12 months in the front room of the house, and then we went out to start to kind of get founding team. And I guess that early we added a person called Lisa Cunningham, who headed our engineering and really helped build our culture. And a few early engineers there, including a guy called Kevin Norris, who would go on to kind of those two are now dual heads of engineering. And we're a very product oriented business, and so those folk have built like an extraordinary engineering culture. But then also joining the team was Ruby Koleski, and Ruby comes from she's a sort of superstar of we call it the heart of product, and really comes from a heritage of building product businesses. And so that's kind of the founding team, and Ruby and Philip and myself share the CEO position, and Kevin and Lisa share the head of engineering role. So we've got a very sort of shared leadership model, and and that culture has allowed us to sort of distribute leadership a lot and build a very what we like to think is we've given people just tons and tons of autonomy, and we've balanced that out with just tons and tons of collaboration. So that's the kind of founding group. We've been, I guess one of the fortunate things of being kind of a second time founder is you can then go and hire in the best people and so Karen Rayner and Kai Crow, who are ran marketing at Sonar Six, joined us, and so I kind of I know what those folk are capable of, and been working with them off and on for more than a decade. There's a lot of stuff like this now where and I could go on and on. I'm sure I'm leaving lots of important people off the list, but there's just so many people there who've kind of come from these previous iterations of building business effectively.
Yeah, well, I know many people who watch this will remember you and the run that Sonar Six had, and the exit, and I asked about the founding team because I remember in the day, when you interacted with someone from your team, it was a very different experience than if you interacted with someone from another traditional HR tech environment. And I mean, in a very good way, in a very distinct and
I was wondering what that meant.
and in a differentiating sort of way. So I was curious about what that, and I'm sure the folks watching would want to know, what are the things from that experience you had with the journey of Sonar Six that have helped you on this run? Clearly pulling the team together and focusing on culture was a big part of it based on your comments. But is there anything else that you think you really learned?
Look, I think that the culture is a big part of it. Also, Philip, my brother, is super focused on culture, right? Really understands kind of culture, and our culture is actually built on relatively simple pillars. It is really built on this idea of just giving everyone autonomy to do what they want, and then just really, balancing that with collaboration. So that is, we have a book called Joyfully, which was written by Ruby and Kevin, and it's really about our way of working. It's about kind of how we have sort of looked at everything that you do in a tech business and just query whether the existing way of doing it is the right way of doing it for us. So for instance, I think that even you look at the kind of way that orgs build software, and the way that product teams and engineering teams interact. Well, in the past, maybe it was waterfall, and then agile Scrum became kind of the set of rituals. And then, more recently, you've had Shape Up, which has kind of been one way of doing it. But we have Joyfully. We have our way of doing it. We've understood the best way of kind of moving that. So there is this element of really kind of trying to own culture, and really within that too, we want to make life better for working people. That's the role of Joyous. At a purpose level, and that's a great purpose because it means we collaborate with a lot of other companies, because that's not something we can deliver ourselves, and our customers, or we collaborate with them to try and deliver that. But also it's important for us to make sure that Joyous is a really great place to work, and I think that you find people will deal with culture in a kind of posters on the wall way, but a lot of culture is kind of structural and programmatic to an extent, right? So we talked about this idea of shared leadership, and that kind of exists in places. That creates a quite unusual looking org chart, right? And one of the things that Ruby has brought to us is our whole org chart is upside down. So if you look at our org chart, you'll find folk like myself are sitting right at the bottom of it, and at the top of it is actually engineers and sales folk and so on, kind of doing the work, right? I think that we've been very big on features like parental leave and so on as well. The parental journey is very, very important to us, particularly as we're trying to build a diverse team, and we've seen that in tech, there's less women attracted into tech because they'll be attracted off. They'll come to environments which are full of men, which is just not an attractive place to work if you're a woman. And so we have much more gender diversity there. In fact, our engineering and product teams are 50-50, and
great.
A lot of that comes to because our leadership is, is we have a lot of engineering and product leadership is split in the same kind of gender split. And the parental journey part of it's super important, because what we've seen is even people who get the kind of gender split right get the seniority wrong. And the reason they get the seniority wrong is because, well, lots of female engineers kind of don't have good pathways to continue building their careers while they're also raising families. And so we've tried to fix that and so on. So, I'm kind of digressing, but we've been very, very big on this idea of how do you actually make Joyous, an archetype of a great place to work. The only other thing which I think I took from my time at Sonar Six and my time at Cornerstone was that, Sonar Six was very much focused on the SMB, and Joyous is very much focused on the enterprise. And that was probably just because our feeling in what I learned, particularly in my time at Cornerstone, is that actually the appetite to do stuff new is actually stronger in the enterprise. So if you're a big publicly listed company, you have a driver to outperform. And so how do you outperform? Well, you just do new stuff, right? SMBs in the mid-market don't have quite so much of that driver. And so to us, it was like, if you really want to invent something new, what you've got to do is you've got to make it stick at the enterprise. Don't do something at SMB and kind of work your way up. Start at the top. And that's definitely something that, I think that I learned from Adam Miller at Cornerstone, because he was very, if you talk to him about the early days of Cornerstone and how do you get into such big customers as well? We targeted big customers. That's it's sort of that simple, right? So I guess that this time around we're more focused on the enterprise, but and I'd say we're more focused on we're much more deliberate with culture this time too. I mean, Sonar Six had a great culture, but it was kind of a bit more accidental.
Yeah, that was great. I really appreciate all that transparency about your team and the culture and the focus there. So why the A round now? Just timing wise, and what do you see yourself doing with the funding now that you've got it?
It's such a good question. The why the A round now? We had no real reason to raise capital at the moment. We had the business is flying. We've got plenty of cash in the bank and plenty of receivables and good long-term contracts. But there was I guess there was two pieces to it, right? One is that the market for capital is so strong at the moment you can't ignore it, right? So we had kind of people knocking on our door. We never had an intention of really doing a round. We were chatting to the market about potentially maybe extending our seed round a little bit. And before we knew it, we had like 5 term sheets in front of us. So there was this sort of thing of like, well, there's an opportunity in the capital markets at the moment, which is unusually, I need to tell you, it's like a strong capital market. So strong capital market in an unpredictable world. Let's take advantage of it. Let's just put some cash on the balance sheet to build the strength of the company. So a part of it was just that, and I'm fundamentally, I guess, a capitalist. I do know that like actually the great companies are great companies. We like to this mythology that great companies are great companies because they invent something new and they have great execution and so on, and those things are all super important. But also the great companies are often the ones that spend plenty on customer acquisition and and building engineering teams and so on.
Yeah.
So like, you want to be able to compete. And the reality of it is a competitive world, right? So what we do know is other folk in the sphere of employee experience will be also taking on board funding, and will also be using it to build better products and so on. So like, you can't not do that. So that's sort of part of it. As to what we're actually using the funding for now that we have it, we're product led, right? We always have been, we always will be. I see that the biggest failing of most SaaS businesses is that point where they flip over from being product led and everyone knows them because they've got a great product, to being kind of sales led, and everyone knows them because they keep ringing them up and telling them, that here we are, buy some stuff. And and the challenge with that is once you become sales lead, you never go back the other way, right? Like you just end up being dominated by salespeople, because a salesperson becomes the economic unit. It's like, oh, if we had, I'll be sitting at the board, and if you add 10 more salespeople, we'll add this much, revenue, which will build this much enterprise value. And last year was good. Let's add 200 this year, and let's add 2,000. Suddenly you've got 2,000 salespeople and 35 engineers. And then like weirdly, the new companies came along and built better products than you. And your only way to react is to sell harder. So you kind of get stuck in that kind of loop, right? So we're using this funding really carefully. We're not going out there and rapidly increasing the size of the team. We certainly will increase our customer success team. We just have to, because we've got more and more customers.
Right.
We're slowly building our sales capability. We have an office in Dallas, Fort Worth. We have an office in Sydney. We have an office in Auckland, New Zealand, that are our sales offices. So we might expand that network a little bit, but we're fundamentally hiring more engineers, more data scientists, more other behavioral cognitive scientists, folk in that space, more product specialists, just so that we can be at the forefront.
Yep. Your bit about hiring salespeople, what would any of us who have sat in a board meeting and have been asked what would happen if we hired 100 more salespeople or 10 more salespeople is felt that when you said it. I'm sure of it. But so one last question for you before we wrap up. I was going to ask about where you sit in the HR tech ecosystem, which is that's a trendy thing to call it these days. And but really getting into the integration bit, I have a feeling that if you're really integrating, it's not with the players that we would traditionally think about based on how you described what you're doing. But I'm curious, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm curious.
Yeah, well, maybe you are wrong. I mean, look, there's a lot of the usual suspects.
And I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm right.
Integrate with. Yeah, it's quite hard to work out the negative phrasing of that question, George. So I would say that we're our primary source of integration to start with is we need to integrate with some kind of people system. And the people systems we integrate with most commonly is Active Directory, actually.
Yeah.
So, like, it's just a simple place. Azure Cloud Active Directory, it's just like, we can kind of get in there. It will typically have lots and lots of information on people. And what we want is we want data. And we want stuff which helps us route feedback. So we want to understand the relationships, and AD often has that. There might be another single sign-on system like Okta or something. We integrate with those. Then typically you want to enhance data, right? And so maybe you just want to find what other demographic data you have, whether it's tenure or whether it's location or something like that. And so then we'll take that data, often from an HRIS, but from the standard ones we integrate with, the Workdays, the Cornerstones. There's numerous of them, right?
Sure.
Then we'll sometimes take in more kind of performance data from a kind of SAP SuccessFactors or something. Sometimes we'll take stuff from kind of other systems, which might be quite specific to the organization. But then, we're always trying to just have more and more data, right? And so one of the things which I think that is cool about kind of a conversational feedback tool like ours is that because you're in conversation with people, you can use that conversation also to enhance your data, right? So you can start to ask questions about, I don't know, about their commute maybe, and now I've got data shaping that attached to people. So effectively, our employee record is quite a data rich record. And I won't go into the kind of arcane nature of it's got horizontal and vertical integrity and all sorts of things like that. So the way the records move around is a really new modern approach to building a database. So there's lots of ways you can do stuff. But if I want to sit there with Joyous, and say, okay, well, find me engineers who work in Springfield. Sure, it's kind of got that information from an HRIS or something. Maybe from Active Directory. Find me engineers that work in Springfield. Okay, I'll filter my live feed by that. But I'm also interested in engineers who work in Springfield who've worked for the company for less than 5 years. Okay, so now it's taking that from a different place. But as far as the user is concerned, it's just like, well, I'm just typing and it's just telling, it's filling out the filter fields and telling me what, this. But then if I say, hey, I'm really specifically interested in conversations people have had on well-being, well, that's now coming from our system and from our kind of tagging and our kind of machine learning. And if I then sort of start to say, and also I'm interested in people who have had negative sentiment over the last quarter related to well-being, of engineers in Springfield with less than 5 years tenure, it can find that, right? So I'm just giving you that example, but when you have the ability to connect to lots of data points and you also continually enrich your own data from the conversations, you eventually end up in this point where you just have extraordinary ability to just find your way around the data. And it's not like you need to be a data scientist to do it. You can literally just be, a curious person in the people and culture team who wants to understand why one part of the organization is more productive than another or something, and get to kind of root cause.
Yeah. That's I find the whole thing fascinating where you're fitting these days. I want to congratulate you again on the A round and your success. And one last thing, where can people find out more about Joyous?
Yeah, look, I mean, joyoushq.com. That's the place to go. I think that I'd encourage people to look at it just from the perspective of understanding what feedback can do. But I'd also really encourage people to look at the resources in there. I mean, there's a ton of blogs and other resources we've provided just on things like one of the most recent pieces out there is just on the role of HR teams and agile orgs. We're spending a lot of time researching sort of the front edge of what's happening and kind of effectively the interface between people and culture and the rest of the organization. And so there's plenty of great content in there too, for folk that want to cool. Kind of learn stuff.
Great. Well, Mike, thanks for being here.
Thank you, George. Lovely to see you as per.